Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 9 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2024 fantasy football season. We are recording Sunday, August 25th, back-to-back episodes being recorded, back-to-back episodes not being dropped consecutively, but a couple days in between. That's okay. My co-host Nick Cap is here. Just want to let you guys know that is why we have the same clothing on if you watch the YouTube. That's why our voices might sound a little bit more hoarse, but recording schedules do get in the way, and that's okay. Fun show that we have for this episode, Nick. It is our favorite value picks for each round. We're going to do 12 rounds. So our favorite value in the first 12 rounds in your fantasy football drafts. And I'm excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, 100%. And this is important. I mean, we'll break it down when we get there, but this is a big part of fantasy. This is how you win leagues, saying this guy is being drafted way too low. This guy's being drafted way too high. This guy can win you a league. This guy will lose you a league if you draft them this high. So this is very important. This is something that gets lost in fantasy. Like, drafting is all about value. It's why a lot of people hate the 101, because if you don't get the right pick, you did not get a good pick, period. You don't get the 101 running back or wide receiver, the one that you wanted. You still might lose if you take that guy at that spot. So value is important, and Nick and I are here today to say we're putting our stamp on this is the value pick. This is who you take.
Nick, I'm going to switch things up a little bit up on you. Let's do 14 rounds. So it's going to be 14 rounds, 10 players per round. So we'll talk about that in 1 second. So if this is your first time listening to us and your drafts are coming up and maybe you were YouTubing and trying to figure out some last minute advice, thank you so much. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. You get shows from us during the week, a live show Sunday mornings during the NFL season, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time on our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We want to set your lineups. We want to help you with those tough flex questions. We want to help you win your week and win your league throughout the year. You could find us on our YouTube channel and all audio streaming platforms, as well as social media at PrimeTime FF Pod. All right, so Nick, why don't you pull up our tab over there on Fantasy Pros? Me and Nick are big fans of Fantasy Pros, and This is kind of where we're going at, and we highly recommend you guys do this before your draft as well. So this updates, I think, on a daily basis, and you just go to rankings. This is average draft position rankings on Fantasy Pros. And Nick, and if you want to hover over here, it actually is the average draft position of each player on each platform. So maybe, Nick, you want to go to Breece Hall over there. Breece Hall is going a little bit higher on ESPN. He's being drafted right now around 4, Sleeper 8, NFL.com 7, RT Sports 4. So if you want Breece Hall, depending on the league that you're drafting in, you might have a harder time drafting him if you're later on in the draft. But for the sake of this show, we are going to go off the ADP consensus rankings on Sleeper. So we're going to do 14 rounds of basically a quote-unquote 10-man draft. We're going to tell you our favorite value in each of those 10 picks. So our best value may not be Christian McCaffrey. It might be somebody else. So Nick, picks 1 to 10. Who is your favorite value from Christian McCaffrey to A.J. Brown?
Looking at the averages, I would say Amon-Ra St. Brown here. For him to be and I know he's tied with Jefferson technically, but he deserves to be in that upper echelon class. I think that if I could rank the draft as I would, it would go CMC 1, and then there's 4 receivers, and Amon-Ra's in that bunch. If you took any of those receivers at the 102, I would not hate it. It's Tyreek, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Jamar Chase, and it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. So to me, Amon-Ra is a clear top 5 pick in fantasy drafts. For him to be on every platform, all 4 of these ranked outside the top 5, it's not criminal, but I think that there's a little bit too much value on the running back.
I'll state it. I think that is criminal. I think this is one of, any of these receivers probably could finish as your number 1, but Amon-Ra St. Brown can finish number 1 in receptions, touchdowns, yards. I think he was wide receiver 3 last year. The Lions' offensive line is still really good. The rest of the offense is still really good. They're going to play in a lot of competitive games this year. I know the schedule will be tougher, but he's going to have to produce. So as long as he's healthy and on the field, I'm right there with you. Amon-Ra St. Brown at 8. Is probably my favorite value pick. And if you look at the top 8 of the board, I think I think discounting Justin Jefferson, I think would have told you anybody from the 7 or 8 pick is probably the best value because they're just really good players up and down the board.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, I'm going to go from 11 to 20 now. So Jonathan Taylor to Devontae Adams.
So looking at it, I do feel like this is a fairly accurate list of where people should be going and
I
where
think so.
like them. The only one that I really don't like is Garrett Wilson. I think he belongs in that upper tier of that top 10. To me, when I look at my drafts, he is consistently the 9th or 10th pick with AJ Brown. And that's kind of where I think he belongs. So to me, that's the one I would say is the outlier. But looking at these, there is not a single person that I think is so far low that they should be higher. I feel like this is a pretty good and fair second round. Honestly, I'd probably say there's probably more guys in the third round that I think should be in the second round. So to me, this is a fine second round.
I hope we do disagree because I actually do like the Garrett Wilson value as well. I mean, if you're picking at 12 and you're telling me I end up with Amon-Ra St. Brown and then Garrett Wilson, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Stoked. I'd be stoked beyond belief. I really do like Pacheco this year, but I like his value a lot more on Sleeper right there at number 28 rather than 19 as we have him here. I don't think he's a bad value in the second round. I know running backs are valuable, but if I can get Pacheco in the third round, I'm stoked beyond belief. All right. So we're going now from 21 to 30. So Travis Kelce at 21, the first tight end off the board, to 30 at Nico Collins.
This is where I feel like all the value is. I think I know Nick and I kind of disagree on Achane. I would say that he's in that second round. I think that Josh Jacobs is probably the biggest outlier because I think he's so much better than this. And you could take a look at the 4 platforms. I know it doesn't show it on the full screen, but 39 through 22. I mean, he has the most variance, I think, of any player this early in the draft between your ADP on one platform.
So 39 is Sleeper. I'm sorry, 39 is ESPN. That's his lowest ranking. And then his highest ranking is on RT Sports at 22.
So to me, I think Josh Jacobs is a back of the second round player. That's where I like him. I've seen so much over the last 2 years. He had a dominant season just 2 years ago. Last year, RB4 up until the injury. And now he gets a monster upgrade in team. They paid him the big money. They let Aaron Jones walk, who it felt like every year they kept hanging on to for one more year. And I'm sure that they would have no problem letting A.J. Dillon go because Josh Jacobs is a similar style running back. Aaron Jones, when he was healthy, was pacing a 67 target season. So if Josh Jacobs is out there and gets all of that production, that's a big win for Josh Jacobs in that passing category, which is something he has not been able to dominate with. And this is full PPR. If he's getting 60 to 70 targets, if I told you he's getting 60, 70 targets this season, he's 100% moving up to the back of the first round, knowing his guaranteed workload. So to me, he's somebody that I'd lock in every single time at the end of the second, early third round.
When I look at value, I look at guys that could finish towards the top of their position, and I think Drake London could finish towards the top of his position. I think the Falcons are going to score a lot of points. I think Kirk Cousins is going to throw the ball a lot. Drake London, with abysmal quarterback play, has still recorded over 69 nice receptions in each of his first 2 seasons. He has over 866 yards in each of his first 2 seasons. The touchdown numbers need to go up. Kirk Cousins will bump those touchdown numbers up. I'd be thrilled to get Drake London within round 3. So round 4, we're going from
Deebo Samuel to Stephon Diggs.
Okay. I guess. I mean, it really should be 30 to 40 though, since we went 1 to 10. So maybe
no. 31's right.
31's right. Okay. Okay. So Deebo Samuel to Stephon Diggs. I think we're both going to have the same one here.
I don't know. There's 3 I like. Deebo, who I keep saying is a tremendous value. He's the guy, again, like in my drafts, and you can take a look at our mock draft 5.0, which just dropped earlier this week. I have no problem taking Deebo in the early third round. And right here, going off the board at 30 would be if you're in a 10-man league, the end of the third round or the beginning of the fourth round. So I think Deebo's a tremendous value every day that Brandon Ayuk's situation, and it might be resolved by the time this podcast comes out. Every day is a better day for Deebo's ADP, and you could see It's kind of weird because one platform throws off the ADP and where they should go, but 3 platforms out of the 4 have them after 29 in this range. So I think that Debo is a smash home run. The other 2 that I like, and we'll give a quick shout out to Cooper Kupp, who I think is getting very underwhelmed in drafts. Every report from camp is the offense still runs through him. He is the wide receiver 1. And if you want to go quarterback, Nick and I said who our MVPs were. Both of us think that Jalen Hurts is the QB1 this season. So, Nick, go right into yours. I think that those are 3 guys that are home run plays here.
Yeah, I mean, ever since joining the Rams, Stafford's, I'll even go back to his previous season with the Lions. Last season with the Lions, 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns. First season with the Rams, 4,800 yards, 41 touchdowns. Got banged up in 2022, only 2,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. Then last year coming back with 3,900 yards, 24 touchdowns. Cooper Kupp's not going anywhere. As long as he's still, on the field, he's not going anywhere. But he should be going to your fantasy teams. If he's going 43 on ESPN, 39 on Sleeper, 27 on the 27, I don't love as much on NFL, but I could deal with it, and 31 on RT Sports. But if he's somewhere in between, 30 to 40, that's a slam dunk pick for your wide receiver 2. Or if you're going running back heavy at the beginning, that's a really solid first wide receiver. So I love the value of Cooper Kupp there. But Lamar Jackson at 39 is not bad either. All right. 41 to 50. This is where we might start to disagree later on in the draft. But who is your favorite value from 41 to 50?
I would go Mark Andrews. I have him ranked as my tight end 1 on the season. And if you could go grab Mark Andrews in the 5th, this is a guy that for multiple seasons was 2nd, 3rd round pick, and he's fallen off a cliff. And I'm not sure why he's fallen this far off, but to me, he's a guy that belongs in that upper echelon. He had one of the most dominant seasons in fantasy football history at the tight end position just a couple of years ago. When he was out on the field, he was averaging, I believe, 16 points per game last season. And then Isaiah Likely after was 15 points per game. So the Ravens know how to get the ball to the tight end position. And Mark Andrews is clearly one of the 10 most talented, no questions asked, tight ends in the league. So when you have a system that benefits the tight end position and you have the talent there, that's 2 check marks for fantasy success. So I think that Mark Andrews is a slam dunk pick this late in your draft.
I'm really liking Kenneth Walker. In Sleeper, he's going at 44. ESPN's 44, Sleeper's 50, which is absurd. And then 42 NFL, 35 on RT Sports. Kenneth Walker, back-to-back seasons, over 219 carries. He has over 900 yards in both of his seasons. Touchdowns are 8 and 9. His average yards per carry is over 4, which is really good. Going into his 3rd season, he's still got his fresh legs. He's still young. I still think they're going to run the ball a ton. If you're going zero running back and you want to load up on your 3 receivers in the first 3 rounds, like if I was drafting and I took my best values of Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Cooper Kupp, I think this is a great back to start your team with. So I'm very cool with that. Pick 51, which is probably our least favorite value in the draft, 260.
Yeah, here I see 0 value.
This is my least yet. This is my least favorite.
This is where I reach for the next round because I think the next round is so much more talented than this round. If I did have to say one guy, and I'm not saying a value, but a guy that I think is a fine pick here, it'd be James Conner. Because James Conner, year after year, just proves you wrong. He's out there. He's productive. With Kyler Murray last season, he averaged 18 points per game, which was I believe it was the RB4 in that span. So to me, if there is a guy that presents the upside, it's James Conner, but he is a little bit older, and I'm not comfortable. They took Trey Benson, who's 6'1", 220 pounds, and built like a freaking tank and fast. So I think at some point, maybe it's not this season, maybe it's next season, Trey Benson could earn that RB1 spot. But Connor's just proven us everybody wrong for so many years. We're like, he's hit the age cliff, he's hit the injury cliff, and every year he winds up outperforming his ADP since he left the Steelers. So if there is one that would kind of entice me, it's him. But again, there's guys that next tier that I think are so much better than this round's value.
I'm going to go with George Pickens. His last 2 years, or first 2 years, first year, 52 receptions, 800 yards, 4 touchdowns. Second year, 63 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So if we get just good quarterback play on the Steelers. I think he'll have a solid year. And Russell Wilson was actually very good last year with a bad Denver Broncos team. So if Russ can kind of put his season together, I think Pickens might actually end up being a steal later on in drafts. All right. We're now looking at 61, Zay Flowers, 270, Najee Harris.
I'm actually going to let you go first because I've stolen, I feel like, half your takes, and I think we have the same guy.
I mean, which one do you want to talk about? I'll talk about one and you take the other then, because I like you like Najee earlier on. I don't know if you're still high on Najee, but I like Zamir White. I said he was one of my running back sleepers of the year. However, look at this: 67 on ESPN, 82 on Sleeper, 76 on NFL, and 56 on RT Sports. I hate that value in RT Sports. Really like the value. If Zamir White was 70 or lower, I would have him, but I'm not, for the sake of this show of favorite value, I can't put him there. So between Kyle Pitts and T. Higgins, I just can't go away from T. Higgins. He's going across the board at 60. I just want to pull up the T. Higgins stats, and I know he was banged up last year, and Joe was banged up last year, so I'm going to negate that. Let's look at his stats his first 3 seasons. 67 yards, 67 receptions, 908 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I believe that was not a Burrow year. I forget who that was. 2021, 74 receptions, 1,000 yards, 6 tutties with Burrow. 2022, 74 receptions, 1,000 yards, 7 tutties with Burrow. This guy was being drafted in rounds 2 to 3 the last 2 years. So what changed about his situation? Did they draft Burton? Yes, but that doesn't change T. Higgins' talent. They lost Joe Mixon. They replaced him with some other backs, but they replaced the running back 6 in fantasy football last year. I think T. Higgins' situation only got better. And because of the way that the Bengals finished last season, they finished 3rd in their division, or did they finish 4th? I think they finished 3rd, or was it 4th? I can't remember now. But their schedule will actually be easier than their NFC North division rivals because of the way they finished due to Burrow's injury. You're getting T. Higgins in round 6. Why is T. Higgins going in round 6, but Jalen Waddle's going so high? Why is DJ Moore going so high? Why is Devontae Smith going so high? Why are all the Texans wide receivers like? There's so much value here with T. Higgins, and I have 3 drafts. I will be bummed if I don't get T. Higgins on at least a team. I want him on multiple. If I do not get him on at least one, I will be bummed because T. Higgins reminds me of Mike Evans last year, who was going right around the slot. I think Nick got him at 6.03 in our league, which is really 7.03 due to the sleepers. I'm sorry, due to the keepers. Insane value to me. Insane.
Yeah, I mean, Higgins was the one I really like on the list. He's the same thing as you. He has fallen way too far in ADP for absolutely nothing. Like,
I understand if the situation changed, like Keenan Allen has slipped down because they drafted Odunze high, and because Odunze is clearly going to be an alpha dog over there, and that I understand. I also understand the Texans wide receivers being shifted around, but Jermaine Burton, and I do like him, so on my dynasty team. For the sake of my dynasty team, I hope that T. Higgins is not a Bengal next year. But for this year, I think T. Higgins is a great pick, and I don't understand why he's so low when his situation did not change.
Totally, and it's not an outlier on one platform holding him back. In between these 4 platforms, he's ranked between 60th and 62nd. So everybody's got him in the same range. Nick and I both disagree with it. If I did have to give another value here, it would probably be Najee Harris. I was a little high on him. Then it was starting to weigh over the season, and now Jalen Warren's got the hamstring injury. So Najee Harris, Cordarrelle Patterson will be the 2 running backs, and I prefer it with 2 running backs than to 3 running backs with Arthur Smith. So for me, I do think that Najee has the upside of a top, maybe not a top 10 back, but right on a high-end RB2 to low-end RB1, and right now he's kind of going off the board as the RB24 in fantasy. So I do think he presents a little bit more value and upside, and his floor should be very safe given the amount of workload he has taken over the last few years. And it's not like Bijan Robinson, where you were upset because you took him in the first top 10 picks last year to expect him to be a superstar. You're taking him very late in your draft with the upside of getting that kind of workload. If he put up Najee's season this year, he would 100% be a 2nd, 3rd round pick next year. And I don't think he's going to do that, but I do think that he presents a safer floor than a lot of people think.
All right, so I think we're in round 8, I think.
Yep.
Pick 71 to 80. This is the Nick Cap round.
This
right?
is this is me.
This is the Nick Cap sleeper round. And I know who you would take if this was your board, but there are definitely some ones who'd be like, I really wish I could take X, Y, and Z. But
if I could get this round every round, if I got this round from my 6 to my 9, I would be so delighted.
Well, to talk about Rashee Rice real quick.
Yeah, Rashee Rice is the guy. I mean, he is 100% my sleeper. If we had a My Guy episode where we said this is the guy I'm trusting for the entire season, we picked 3 of them, Rashee Rice would be the first one that gets my stamp. Every single day that we keep waiting and we do not hear suspension or legal news about him is a better week for Rashee Rice. It is looking more and more like next season he's going to face the suspension, which is great for us as fantasy football managers that draft him. Right now, if you looked at his production from the end of last season in his situation, wide receiver 1, that's been the report out of camp. That's been the entire time. Then you have Hollywood Brown already dealing with injuries. You have aging Travis Kelce. You have Isaiah Pacheco. But more importantly, you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Like, this is a superstar team, and Rashee Rice is proving to be a superstar in this league. It's off the field issues that are holding him back from his ADP. Last year, after week 12, as a rookie wide receiver, he was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy football from that span. If you can get that teamed up with the best head coach in the league, the best quarterback in the league, and we did not have suspension news, he would 100% be a 2nd or 3rd round pick in fantasy drafts this year. So to me, and Nick knows we're in a keeper league. I have my pick before him, so I do not mind saying it. If Rashee Rice is there and we could keep anyone 6th round or later drafted, I'm 100% locking in Rashee Rice there, because if he faces the suspension this season, that means next season I have as my last pick of the draft, who I think is a top 10, top 20 top 12 wide receiver. So I love the value there, especially in a keeper format like we have. But even if he did get suspended, it's going to be a handful of games. It might be 2, 3, 4, 5. And if he misses that time, it's late enough in your draft where he's your first bench player. It's not even like he's going to be taking a starting position and locking him in. Where if he were at the 3rd round, you miss out on a player that you know will be there every single week. So to me, I just think he's such a value. I do want to give a quick shout to my other values, Calvin Ridley, a guy that I've loved but can't seem to wind up in drafts. I feel like every time I take Rice, Ridley never makes it back to me. And then Raheem Mostert, who I think presents one of the safest floors at running back. If you're going 0 RB, that is the guy you lock in this late in your draft.
Kyler Murray is right there. He's going at quarterback 10 right now. 2021 Kyler Murray, and he's missed games every single year. So that's a little bit of concern. You may want to draft a backup. That's okay. But he was number 4 in average fantasy. And I like doing average here because he's missed games. 2021, number 4 in average. 2022 is when he suffered, the ACL in average points. I'm just going to pull it up real quick. 2022, he finished 9th in average. And one of those, he scored 0.7 in week 15 because of the injury. So that hurts his average, unfortunately. And then 2023, coming off the injury, he finished, so pull up the average again. He finished 9th in average. So you're looking at a guy who's been top 10 in average points after being riddled with injuries. Now he has over a year to fully recover from the injury. They drafted Marvin Harrison for him. He has Trey McBride. He still has his legs. I think this is a great pick if you're waiting on your quarterback. Every year, there's always like a late round quarterback that does help win leagues. I think this year might be Kyler Murray, and this is going to be my target in a lot of leagues.
Totally agree.
All right, round 9, 81 to 90. I like the running back value here. I like Zach Moss, and I like Brian Robinson.
So I've been doing a lot of 0 running back and hero running back strategy. If that's the case, Brian Robinson to me is the pick. He presents to me the safest floor, guaranteed rushing workload, guaranteed time on the ground. Austin Eckler, even as phenomenal as he was for those 2 years with the Chargers, he only played less than 50% of snaps. He was a 3rd down back and receiving back. Brian Robinson's going to have every opportunity to eclipse that. And Cliff Kingsbury is a creative coach. I don't know if the touchdowns are going to be high, but I would be
Oh
shocked.
no, Cliff Kingsbury loves running the ball within the 5-yard line.
That's true with James
I
Conner.
think Connor might lead the league in like rushes within the 10 if he stays healthy the entire Brian Robinson. I'm sorry. I think Brian Robinson might lead the league in carries within the 10. He'll be up there. Yeah.
So to me, that's the guy if you're going for the zero strategy where you think safe amount of workload can get you that 10 to 12 every single week. And like Nick said, if he is that touchdown machine and getting that many carries near the goal line as James Conner did, well, then he's a smash mouth play, and he's 100% going to have that finally breaking out season that we've been hoping for a couple of years.
I'm going to go with Zach Moss because Nick went with Brian Robinson. My concern with Moss here is Chase Brown, but whichever Cincy running back does kind of edge the other one out, or if one gets hurt, there's a ton of value with an offense that's just going to score a lot of points. They decided to pay Zach Moss, knowing that they had Chase Brown last year. Chase Brown's not a rookie this year. They just drafted, not like a Romo Dunze situation. They chose to pay Zach Moss, knowing that they lost Joe Mixon. Zach Moss had a pretty solid season last year, filling in for Jonathan Taylor. He had almost 800 rushing yards. He had 5 touchdowns. Not a league-winning guy, but a serviceable guy if you are going with zero running back and need to load up on some running backs. I love his value on both ESPN at 100 and also in RT Sports at 118. I'm sorry, NFL at 118. Those are great values. So that's why I'll go with Zach Moss and think it's okay to throw a dart at him.
Yeah.
Round 10, Brock Purdy starts at 91, and we go down to JSN at 100.
I mean, if this was the board for me, I'm taking Ladd McConkey, and I'm not thinking twice about it.
Who are you taking in our league?
I'm sorry?
Who would you take in our league? Would it still be McConkey?
Yeah, it would definitely still be McConkey.
I would take a Dunze in our league.
He would be the other one I consider. I prefer him for the Dynasty format, but also our league sleeper, he's going 72. I do think the hundreds are more accurate there. McConkey, to me, is going to very quickly have the opportunity to be the wide receiver one for who I consider the 5th or 6th best quarterback in football in Justin Herbert. He's going to play in the slot, which is phenomenal. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, for the last 4 years with Justin Herbert, have been phenomenal every time they're out on the field for fantasy. So, to me, whether you love Herbert or you don't like him, you acknowledge he puts up numbers, and Nick will say stat sheet stuffer. I say I don't think it's empty calories. I think that he's the reason that they do compete week to week. But to me, Ladd McConkey has so much upside, not only like long-term in his career, but just his rookie season. Being a slot receiver for a top quarterback is a phenomenal situation to walk into. Keenan Allen last year came off the best season of his career. From his own mouth, not from mine, to say he earned a contract. So Ladd McConkey is going to get 80%, 75% of that workload and that amount of time on the field. That's a top 24 wide receiver on the season. So to go this late at the wide receiver 40 is a no-brainer for Ladd to be a little bit higher.
I don't want to take Odunze at pick 72, maybe in our league. I'd think about it, but 108 over on ESPN, 117 RT Sports. I think Odunze is a great pick. He clearly has a connection with Caleb Williams. He might not, he's going to have to ride your bench for probably the first couple of weeks, but he might have the Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of breakout in the back half of the season. I also do want to mention Nick Chubb here. If you're going zero running back, I would definitely take Chubb at 110 on ESPN, 109 on NFL.com. Nick Chubb's going to have to, put some oil in his motor a little bit. It's going to take him 2 or 3 weeks once he actually does return. But hey, if you want to win a fantasy football championship and you get in the playoffs and Nick Chubb is staring at you as your running back too, a healthy Nick Chubb, hopefully, that's a great back to have. So if you get Nick Chubb, I would go out there and get either Jerome Ford or have somebody you could plug in for those first probably 6 weeks. But I think there's some good value there with Chubb. I know we're only supposed to pick one, but I do want to mention other guys if they're there.
Yeah.
All right. Round 11, I think, or 12. I think it's 11.
11.
11. Hollywood Brown at 101 to the San Francisco 49ers defense at 110.
And let's just say this, Nick and I will never factor a kicker or defense in this early in our fantasy.
We tried to take it off and it wouldn't let us. So for the sake of the show, like they have to be in there, but like, yeah.
you could look at how ridiculous this is. I mean, NFL.com. Like, what are we doing? ESPN, what are we doing? Sleeper, you got it right. These guys are.
If you're drafting a defense in round 6, don't play in my I want the
play
free
in
win.
my
So
fantasy league.
maybe do play in my fantasy league.
Especially because that means Rashi Rice.
If you're drafting a defense in round 6, you need this show for sure.
100%.
There you go. All right.
So there's a clear 2 I like. I know Nick likes one of them. So
you take one, I'll take the other. We like them both.
I'm gonna go Keon Coleman then, potential wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen. Like I said with Ladd McConkey, slot receiver for a wide receiver room that is literally empty from last year. Josh Jacobs, Quentin Johnson being the 2 returning outside guys, Ladd McConkey on the inside. Well, Keon Coleman's going to be on the outside, and he has the upside to take over that Stephon Diggs role. Curtis Samuel is kind of like their safety blanket. Khalil Shakir is your Gabe Davis, where week to week you might have that big explosive game, but more often than not, it's going to be closer to the floor. And to me, Keon Coleman by the end of this season has the most upside to be the 8 to 12 target guy, a big man, a big red zone threat. That's something that you always like to see from a rookie or any receiver really in your league. So he checks a few boxes, and the reason I don't think he's higher is because they took him at either the end of the first or the early second round. I forget, but it was right there at the turn. If he was drafted just a few picks earlier, if they did not trade down, I think they traded with the Chiefs, I want to say, where the Chiefs took Xavier Worthy. If they did not do that, we would have Keon Coleman so much higher in our drafts. It's because of a few draft spots later, but Keon Coleman was the guy that Josh Allen said he wanted the entire time. So to me, that checks a big box for me. And that says a lot about who the player is. And we've seen a lot of the fun stuff with Keon Coleman, which definitely makes him more of a fan favorite early on. But the talent's there, the quarterback's there, the situation's there. He's replacing a receiver who, even though he was bad on the back half of the season, was a top 5 receiver in fantasy football up until they changed the offensive coordinator. So there's just a lot of upside for a guy like Keon Coleman. And he's a guy that you could easily stash on your bench for a few weeks this late in your draft before you have to start him or trade him or whatever you want to do with him.
I do really like Coleman. We both also really like Jaden Daniels. I'm sorry about that. Go to our last a couple shows ago on our YouTube channel or our audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, etc., and go to our breakouts episode, breakouts, bust, and MVPs. Hopefully you'll listen to the whole show, but if you just want to hear about Jaden Daniels, go to the timestamp that says breakout quarterback. Me and Nick both ended up having him as our breakout for multiple reasons. Excellent stats in college. He looks really good in the preseason and camp. They're going to play from behind. He's rushing upside. I'm not going to do the entire take now because we've already done it at the breakouts episode, but make sure you go check that out. The timestamp's right there. We talk about it for like 3 minutes if you only have 3 minutes of your time, and we'd appreciate it as well. Mm-hmm. All right, round 12, 111, Gus Edwards to 120, Blake Corum.
So to me, the safe floor play and the early starter, the 0 running back guy, is Jerome Ford. He will own that backfield. They are not bringing Kareem Hunt back. Dante Foreman dealing with injuries already. So it is kind of his backfield for the time being. And you could say what you want about him. When he was out there, he was efficient enough and put up enough fantasy points to be reliable. And the fact is, a starting running back this late in the draft going off the board, running back 39, is very low for fantasy football. For that kind of production, that kind of workload, to me, he does not present the same upside as a lot of other guys, but he is the safest floor play, I feel like, from any of the running backs this late in your draft, who's going to get that guaranteed workload. Last year, the Browns ran the most snaps per game of any team in the league, and the most rushing attempts per any team in the league. So to me, I do think that the Browns have a upside and a safe floor of good coach, run the ball, offensive line is good. They play it up tempo. And if you're going to get 12 to 15 carries from Jerome Ford, and you're going to get a couple more receptions this year because they're not bring Kareem Hunt back and Dante Foreman's been hurt, that's like such a safe floor for a running back this late in your draft. So I don't think he's a league winner. But do I think that for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, until Nick Chubb is back and in full form, he can be a near top 24 running back? Yeah. And if you're taking him in the RB 40 range, that's a safe floor. And if you're going 0 RB, that's the strat. And then you figure it out on waivers later in the year.
I'm going to go with Chase Brown here. I think it's actually a better value than Zach Moss. I think he might catch more passes than Zach Moss. He's going at 127 on ESPN and 144 in NFL for the backup running back for the Bengals, who could end up being the starter. If you don't like somebody, let's say you take Zach Moss early, and you don't like any player within this range, I would handcuff Chase Brown just to be safe.
Yeah.
All right. Round 13, 2 more rounds left that we're doing of this. 121 to 130. Brian Thomas Jr. at 121 to Justin Herbert at 130. To J.K. Dobbins at 130.
So if you took Brian Robinson, Trey Benson, Khalil Shakir, J.K. Dobbins, I have absolutely no problem with any of those four. But if you want to win your fantasy league, it's Brian Thomas Jr.
Yep, this is insane value. If he's going, and I mean, I'm gonna have this one too with you, Nick. But 131 on ESPN, that's crazy. 134 on NFL.com, that's crazy. 125 RT Sports and 105 on Sleeper. I love all of those values, and that's great. That's another guy. I want to make it out of my drafts with him.
Because we love our fans, I'll say this in front of Nick. Brian Thomas in camp is being compared to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. So the reports from training camp for
those Tigers
is they have drafted the best a top 5 potential wide receiver in football. Now you pair him with Trevor Lawrence, who to me is a stat sheet stuffer, and you let Calvin Ridley go. You have Christian Kirk, who gets banged up all the time. Gabe Davis, who's your inconsistent deep threat. Brian Thomas Jr. might come out the first 3 weeks and look like an absolute dud or a stud. But I'm very confident that by the time we get to week 12, week 13, week 14, we're like, is Brian Thomas a league winner? Is he one of the top 15 talented receivers in football? The upside for him is so tremendous. And to me, I'm not saying the range of outcomes is a top 5 receiver, but if you look at the formula who has hit Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Puka Nacua, the 3 rookies that went later in the draft, much later in your fantasy drafts, obviously. Jamar Chase a little bit higher than the others, but for what went well on their team, the amount of targets that they got, who left the team, you had Stephon Diggs walk out, you had AJ Green walk out. Obviously you have Matthew Stafford at quarterback, you have Kirk Cousins, you have Joe Burrow, you have Trevor Lawrence. Like, there's a lot of boxes checked and similarities between them. So if the talent of Brian Robinson is what the training camp report is, that's a guy that's finishing in the top 10, and we don't know how it's going to happen, but that's a guy that has that kind of upside and that kind of leverage and can be that superstar stud player for your fantasy team. So if you could get him in the 13th round, which is where we're at, I mean, how the hell do you not hit the draft button on that?
I'm not going to say anything else because go back to our breakouts, bust, and MVPs episodes and take 3 minutes. Just click the wide receiver breakout. Nick, I believe, had Rashee Rice. I had Brian Thomas. If you want to listen to my Brian Thomas take, you could skip ahead a little bit. I'm sure you all are very good with technology, but go to our YouTube channel. Yep, it is timestamped in the description to make it super easy for you guys on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Final round. For the sake of the show, we will end up doing it from 131 Justin Herbert to 140 Jake Elliott. However, I don't think me or Nick like any of these values. I like values farther down the draft board, but sake of the show, round 14, 131 Justin Herbert to round 1 to pick 140 Jake Elliott.
So I like Nick said, don't love any of these values. Nick and I both, for the sake of the show, we won't go in depth, but we do like 141 a lot better than some of those values. If I did have to pick and I wanted the flex guy, it would be either Curtis Samuel or Romeo Doubs. Doubs is the one that intrigues me because this does not get talked about a lot. Jordan Love was on some, I think it was a Bleacher Report like question hypothetical thing, and he was asked to build his perfect receiver based on the talent in the league, and he said this for Devontae Adams and this for maybe it was Justin Jefferson. The only Packer that he threw in there was Romeo Doubs' deep threat catching ability. So I'm not saying that means Romeo Doubs is the wide receiver one on the team. Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is when he had the thought of every receiver and his own receivers, he said, that's the guy I trust with my deep ball. And if you're going to go win a league and need a flex guy, which this late in your draft, you're looking for someone you could slot in for a flex, Romeo Doubs is the guy that Jordan Love said to you. For a 50-yard touchdown, that's the guy I want running that route. So, I don't know. Just kind of gives me some like, ooh, the young quarterback we think is really, really good or could be really, really good loves this receiver, and he's the 4th one on his team being drafted. So, I don't know. It's something that intrigues me.
I'll go with my Seahawks, Zach Charbonnet. It's good handcuff to Kenneth Walker. If Walker goes down, Charbonnet instantly becomes a top 15, 10 back in fantasy football, can catch a lot of balls as well. And with Walker going into his 3rd season, if he, I don't pray on this, but if he does get hurt and Charbonnet slots in, the Seahawks may just not, they might cut ties with Kenneth Walker. So and that's why I would go with Charbonnet. All right. That was 14 rounds right there. Me and Nick gave a bunch of different players, couple of the same, but in total, I think we gave you probably 25-ish players that we think are just smash values in each round of your draft to help you guys prepare for your fantasy football drafts coming up this week or next week before the start of the NFL season. If you enjoyed the show, if you're a first-time watcher and listener, maybe not, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Smash the like button on this video and any video that you watch in the future. Make sure that bell icon is notified so you get notifications every time we go live. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform, thank you for that too. Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Follow us and interact with us on our social media channels, especially with any questions. Primetime FF Pod on Instagram and TikTok, Primetime Fantasy Podcast on our Facebook channel as well. Thank you guys for your support. As always, the next time you'll hear from us will be this upcoming Monday. It is Monday, September 1st, 2nd. That will be our live draft. So we're going to go live 8 o'clock Eastern time on our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram channels. And you can watch me and Nick rip our hair out as we do our yearly draft. So thank you guys for that. And we will talk to you on draft night.